here with stand-up poet extraordinaire Ash Dickinson. Welcome back to Hull. This is the several times this year you've been.
Several times, indeed. Yes, Hull's always been good to me, and it was today as well.
You're always good to us, though. You call yourself a stand-up poet, and I know there's a comedic edge, at least, to your poetry and to your performances. But what that really set me thinking about was comedy. Is it prose or is it poetry?
Oh, so you can't break me in gently.
Yeah.
What's this? This is a fairly existential question to begin with. Is it prose? Is it? I don't know. Neither. And both, possibly. I mean, my stuff is probably a lot of it is. I would say it was decreasingly comedic. I'm writing some heavier stuff now. I think it's just the age I am these days. I'm writing some real life's coming and giving me a bit of a kick in, so I tend to write some more serious stuff. But I think probably stand-up is hopefully we touch upon all kind of writing art forms. I think if anything's well written, I don't think it really matters if it's prose or poetry. I think it should encompass both or neither.
So one of the we both work in schools, and I'll talk about that later, but one of the schools that I work in, the library, put all the joke books and all the poetry books in the same section. I kind of questioned that at first. What do you reckon?
Wow. So you could actually go to get a book of comedy and actually get like Sylvia Plath. It'd be like, I'm going to come in here, I want a joke book. Oh, Sylvia Plath, that looks ideal. So that's basically it, is it?
That's basically it, yeah.
Right, okay. Well, some verse obviously is limericks and there is light-hearted, and you look at Spike Milligan or Roger McGough and there's certainly some light-hearted comedy in a lot of this stuff, but I think I probably straddle both camps really in terms of and I think this is what you should do if you're going to do a 45-minute 50-minute set. It shouldn't all just be funny, or it shouldn't all just be serious. There should be a mixture of styles and a diversity of themes and feelings and moods and emotions.
Now you're definitely a travelling bard, and you've travelled to the Americas. You've travelled down under, because you tell us about that, and some of your poetry is based there or inspired by being there. What's the spoken word scene like in the rest of the world?
America's got a pretty good scene, and Canada's got a pretty good scene. I went to Canada and did fringe festivals, and they're people come out in force for this fringe festivals. And it's a while ago since I was in Australia and New Zealand, but I think like everywhere has got. You can speak to people who know nothing about performance poetry, about spoken word, and they have no idea that this exists, and it's everywhere if you know about it. And I think if you can go somewhere and uncover it, and it's there, it's somewhere there. And so I think most places have somewhere, and like Hull. I mean, I was just chatting to a friend of mine, and he was telling me about a night that in Hull that I had no idea existed. And there is the undercurrent of these nights. There's always somewhere, and if you're into it, it reveals all these different nights and different places you can go and perform and go and be an audience and go and listen to and appreciate stuff.
Talking about performance and your performances, I was interviewing Holly McNish and I was talking about her and her performance, and I think she's got a great performance.
Absolutely.
But she was very self-effacing, and she mentioned you specifically as someone who was a real performance
who
poet.
Wasn't self-effacing.
Yes.
And who was up his own bottom.
And there's a physicality. I thought she meant it was because you'd learnt all your words. And then I saw you perform, and I saw it was much more than that. There's a real physicality to the way that you perform. How important is that performance aspect in getting the poetry across?
Well, I would say less than it was in terms of physicality. I think I'm getting older, my bones are getting creaky. I don't get up from the floor as quick as I used to. But I think, to be honest, if you're going to watch me for 50 minutes, I'm not pretty enough that you're quite prepared just to sit and be like, listen to the words. I think you have to do something that's going to be more emotive and physical, and you have to, it has to be more visual. I think that's ultimately it. When I first started writing poetry, I would just read it from the page, and this is it. And the only the sort of visual aspect would be me turning a page. It's like, yeah, this is the big moment, guys. You watching this? Yeah, awesome. So no, I think it, it adds to the words, and particularly the ones that are visual, the ones that are written from the point of view of particularly the surreal ones. The movement and the theatricality adds something to the words as well. It enhances them and increases them, definitely.
Now, your book, so there's always a strange thing when you've got a performance poet and you're looking in their books and you're reading their poems, but the use of the slash, the backslash, the oblique as like a poetic punctuation. I'm reading your poems and I'm reading them the way that you read them to us because of those. Is that, are you I was thinking, is Ash a musician? Is he directing us? Has he just invented new punctuation? Where did that idea come from?
Well, I wanted you to go home and prepare and be me in front of the mirror. No, I wanted to. I wanted you basically to. I would like the poems to be read. It's spoken words. So ultimately, the whole thing about the book was, this was the third publisher that came to me. The first two I turned down because I didn't think my stuff worked on the page. It wasn't meant for the page. Third time, by this point, I was having so many shows and so many schools and amount of people that said to me, do you have a book, do you have a book, do you have a book? I thought, and also I wanted one by this point. I was like, so, but I wanted the poems to sound like I would speak them. And it needs to be read, and it needs to be read in the way that I would want them to be read. So putting in the slash marks was my way of saying, well, here's my breath marks. This is where it pauses. Yeah. And ultimately, I want you to be to get the most out of these poems, and I want them to come across as they should come across. That's really how that was. It
felt like I was playing a score. He really did. He was brilliant. Wow. He really does work.
I'm enjoying this interview. This is getting all right. I'm getting more massaged my ego than I was downstairs doing the show. This is brilliant.
It's because I've got this crazy naive belief that poets are like rock stars, and it's something I've always thought. And the fact that when I realised that you could actually hire a poet and they'd come and read your poems, it was like finding out you could get the Rolling Stones to come and play at your birthday party.
I'm probably less the Rolling Stones and more like Keane.
Yeah, or I could get Keane to come and play my party. Now,
I don't know.
You mentioned schools, and you mentioned you do loads of work in schools, as I do. Children, kids, teenagers, they don't write and they don't like poetry. Discuss. Put it in an exam way. Oh, please do come and enjoy some more spoken word.
Okay, just a break, or maybe you sit on
I would love people to come walk. Why are you holding them up? I want them walking past.
You're not enjoying this interview?
I said yeah.
I'm loving it. I said I feel like I'm on Jules' holiday.
It's a cracker.
No, I want people walking past. Please, people, come past. You're adding colour to it all. I did tell people not to hold people up. Yeah, please come and enjoy some spoken word poetry.
We're in the middle of an interview, but
this is adding to it all. And there's a stream. These are all storytellers from Hull that are walking past. Look, there's at least 3 there that are storytellers. There's another storyteller, there's another storyteller. How amazing is this?
Jules Holland is interviewing Paul McCartney.
Oh, and here's a sound engineer.
And everybody's walking past. We can just
add. Is that my amp? Did you borrow it? Did it work?
It didn't work for the keyboard, but it worked for the vocals. Because the keyboard, because the piano, it just small. It didn't take the whole range, you know.
But when I brought it in the other day, the only reason why I didn't lend it out was because it wasn't working.
It worked fine.
I think it's because it knows I was going to throw it away because I wasn't going to get it fixed.
All right. Well, if
brilliant.
Throw it away, throw it at me.
No, now it works. I know that it will become a resource.
We can probably edit all this out, can't we?
I'm keeping all this in. This is the only bit I'm keeping in. Here we go. So there's some fans coming past now. But you did notice the storytellers. We've had at least 24 poets, storytellers, performers doing this Freedom to Tell Tales off the barge around the city. What do you reckon that says about Hull?
I think it's amazing. I think it's brilliant. I love the fact that there's a commitment to spoken word, which is, I mean, poetry. So you're always banging your head against a brick wall trying to get poetry to to ever get noticed or ever get some respect or recognition or anything. So to have a commitment to spoken word is brilliant. It's wonderful. And I saw the program and I thought just the same. I was like, well, this is terrific because I play quite a few festivals, and often I'm one of a handful, a smattering of spoken word people who might be on. And it's more or less a music festival, and you just it's like a concession. They'll have a bit of a bit of spoken word. So wonderful, terrific. Yes, no, I think it's brilliant. I think it's really brilliant.
And Hull's like that. I do remember when I was a student, there was a poetry night, and if you didn't get there early, you'd have to sit on the floor. And we're talking a fair-sized venue as well. Yeah. Schools. This is where we were, and it is something that I'm interested in. It's something that I endlessly discuss with other people that work in schools. Kids don't like poetry and they don't write.
Yeah, well, I mean this is true, but I think this is partly down. I wouldn't say this is down to schools, because it's not really schools' fault. It's the directives from the government. You know, there's so many flawed things in education. I was just talking to a fan of mine over there about said thing. No, I mean, sorry, that's a fan. That sounds terrible. Okay.
You're hanging around on a boat that is full of poetry fans. I think it's fair enough. You can call them. You're allowed to call them fans on this boat.
No, I mean, the education's flawed massively, and I think a part of this is.
Before I get to have to do another one.
This is part of the reason about. The way if kids don't like poetry, this is the reason. And I was the same. I didn't like poetry when I was a kid, and then when I left school and I got into lyrics first off, and then I found poets that spoke to me that I never had in schools, and there's more of a push now for the Keatses and stuff, which I don't think kids are going to appreciate. But then there's also a push for rap. And the comparisons and the connections here about how rap is like poetry, and I think this is the way in, isn't it? Yeah. And I find kids know about slams and they know about spoken word. I think there's a bit more kind of just knowledge and an interest and an acknowledgement to this and I think this is it can only help. But
I was talking to someone about, as a teacher, when I've had to teach not just poetry but music, there's this idea that you've got to get people to appreciate music, and appreciation is enjoyment and understanding, and they get to a point where you start thinking, well, as long as they understand it, it don't really matter if they enjoy it or not.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree entirely. Absolutely. Well, it can reach you on many levels, can't it? And this is it. Particularly with poetry, it's not. It can be something. I mean, admittedly, my stuff is. I think has subject matter that I think you can either identify with or that will take you somewhere. But there are some poets that it's just a feeling and it's a sound. And you don't understand. A bit like music can be exactly the same. You don't understand what the song's about, but it moves you. Yeah. And I don't see that, I think you don't have to necessarily have poetry like an autopsy in schools and you pick it apart and you destroy everything. It can just reach you on a very guttural, immediate level that you think, I don't know why this is relevant to me, but I feel it's moved me in some way. And let's not explain that. Let's just think that emotion and that level is enough.
In my naivety, I've done poetry sessions with rock musicians that I'm teaching in a rock music course at school. And I remember reading Not Waving But Drowning, and one of the students suddenly went, did the hair stand up on anybody else's neck? And want me to give him the photocopy of the poem afterwards so he could take it home. So I think sometimes part of it is just don't patronise them.
No, absolutely.
Talking about great poems, one of my favourites, I'm going to try and remember the title, is it A Week at the Sea?
One of mine.
Yeah,
Yeah. 1 Week at Sea, yeah.
1 Week at Sea. I'm going to say a word, and I hope you're going to take it the right way, which is nonsense.
I don't know that I am going to take it the right way.
And I'm talking nonsense in the ways of Edward Lear, because there's a thing that if you want to be pretentious, you call it surrealism. If you want to be English, you say words like nonsense. I know you say it's surreal, but it has an impact and it has a power that is way beyond what seems like a load of crazy things happening. It has an intensity
Yeah.
and a poeticism, despite or because of the fact that it seems like a crazy story.
You see, I love the surrealism. And my own favourite writing of my own poetry is when the surrealism really kicks into gear. But I don't like surrealism for surrealism's sake.
Yeah.
I don't like, a watermelon and a radiator are in a bar having a chat, and then the punchline is, grapefruit.
Yeah.
It's rubbish.
Yeah.
And so I think something like that came of an idea that was kind of a crazy idea, but I think ultimately it has a lot of power and a lot of poignance. And I think all of the crazy ideas go somewhere, and there's a reason for them, and they are going somewhere. And I think ultimately you're getting bombarded by something where you think, this is really bizarre. What's going on here? Why? But ultimately, hopefully, you're taken somewhere where you think, wow, it was something that couldn't be discussed in quite the same way if you hadn't have given it a surrealist angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would have just been like, I think that has environmental impact, and I think it was written from a real true point of view.
Yeah.
That I think as of my poems, there's 2 or 3 that people really connect with, and that is definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
The amount of people that come up to me afterwards and say that is one that meant something to me, and so it must have been one that I clearly got something across.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I love nonsense in the sense of English surrealism, which is what I was getting at, but I just thought I'd throw you a bit of a curveball there. There's the big anthology of English nonsense, and the kind of sad disappointment, but you kind of expect it is, there's Edward Lear, there's Lewis Carroll, and the rest of it is rubbish. That is one of the few English surrealist poems that I think deserves a place in there.
Well, yeah,
I don't want to massage your ego, but that is the case.
I'm loving this interview. It's it's great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
What can you say? Sorry, but it's a statement that I think is true, and I
would say it was one of my better poems. So I think that was a poem that I really, how it is with things. You always find flaws, even when you do something you think, well, I like that. There's always something that you would probably change, but I don't think there's a lot of flab in that. I think ultimately that is one that I've pretty much nailed it in terms of what I wanted to say.
Yes. Talking about being cut to the bone, haikus, they appear for you to be some sort of comic, some sort of comic gift, some sort of comic material.
Pretty
Why do
much,
haikus work as comedy, coming back to the initial subject of being a stand-up poet?
Well, I don't know. I didn't write haikus until I was in this slam. As I was saying downstairs, that there was a show in Canada. They have every year. They have a haiku slam, haiku death match it's called, and people are pitted off against each other, and they read haikus to one another off a clipboard. It's hilarious, but it's not haikus as I know them. Traditional Japanese poems, all written about nature. It's completely different to this. And it opened my eyes to haikus, and I think there's something the fact that it's structured. I think people know that it can only last so long. And also there's a skill in writing one, because you only have 17 syllables to work with. It's a skill to write one of these things, and I think when you've done it, and I think you can write 17 syllables and there'll be no flab. It's just as it is, I think they're quite nice as a bit of a lightening. I'm writing some heavy stuff, which, if you listen to 3 or 4 minutes of quite heavy stuff, they beautifully lighten the mood entirely. Yeah.
And your performances are a bit of a journey from the long, the surreal, the intense, and you ended it in a very short, snappy way. So I'm going to end this in a short, snappy way. Ash, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed.